Joined as usual by General Amador, who is, of course, a distinguished fellow here at JINSA's Commander Center for Defense and Strategy. I'm Jonathan Rui, JINSA's Director of Foreign Policy. As always, thank you to our audience for joining. And if you have any questions during the course of this webinar, feel free to type them into the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to address them in the time we have. General, it's a lot I'd like to get to today, as usual. I'd like to start with Gaza itself and then try to touch on some other subjects. Obviously, the story dominating the headlines, at least here in the United States, is the prospect of an expanded operation into Rafa in southern Gaza. Could you provide us some context of, first of all, what would be the necessity or the operational goals of potentially extending the current operation into Rafa?
Good evening. I think that Israel does not have any other option but to go to take Rafah in the way that we did in the other parts of the Gaza Strip. This is the last stronghold of Hamas. We don't know what is there under the ground and on the ground. Maybe when we pushed the leadership from the north into the south, and now we are going after them under the ground in Khan Yunis, it is thus logical to assume that some of them, or all of them, went down to Rafa, closer to the Egyptian border. And as I said, the last place in which we didn't dismantle the military forces of Hamas. There are 4 battalions there. So it is the last stronghold and it should be taken. The problem, which is well understood in Israel, is that the many Palestinians from other parts of the Gaza Strip went down to Rafah. They had the dream of crossing into the Sinai Peninsula. The Egyptians do not let Palestinians to cross into Sinai, into Egypt. I can understand them. They despise the Palestinians. They're afraid from Hamas, and they don't want to take part in the new Nakba, in the new refugee operation of Israel. And this is why the Egyptians do not let anyone to go into the other side of the border, into the Sinai Peninsula. And the IDF cannot fight and to make a real battle to control the on the ground and under the ground when there are around 1 million Palestinians. There, no one knows the exact number. And before the war, the number of people in this area was between 250,000 to 300,000, and it's at least tripled itself. I mean, it's close to 1 million, more than 1 million, a little bit less than 1 million, but it's around 1 million Palestinians. So it's too crowded. The IDF cannot fight in this situation. And the plan is to move them, to convince them to move as we move almost the same number from the north part of Gaza. In this case, it will be probably easier because of 2 very important facts. One is that at the beginning, we didn't have any clue how to do it. The Palestinians didn't understand what we want. They're afraid that we will not keep the word that we gave not to strike in the safe haven, which was designated by us. I mean, a lot of experience by both sides. And the second fact, which is very important to assess how long it will take, or if it's possible at all, is the fact that unlike in the beginning of the war, when we asked the population to move in the north, Hamas is much weaker. At the beginning of the war, they succeeded to block many Palestinians from moving to the south, at least for a week or 2. and only then the dam was open and people went down to the area which was designated by the IDF. Here, Hamas is much weaker, so they will not have the same abilities to block the population. And if the combination of better experience in our side and in their side with the weaker Hezbollah to stop the process, I believe that can be done. And Israel is determined to dismantle the battalions of Hamas in Rafa. And for that, we have to go into Rafa. But before that, we will evacuate most of the population.
So thank you, General. And you raised the issue, the obvious humanitarian dimension that's inseparable from the operations. Could you comment on either the likelihood or the realistic nature of the talk about U.S. or Arab efforts to provide humanitarian tent cities and other aid in southern and western Gaza? Is that something that's ongoing, and do you see a great possibility for that?
UNRWA is not part of the solution. UNRWA is part of the problem. And if we want to keep the refugeehood, the notion of the Palestinians as refugees, it's the only refugee community which is growing all the time. Not because there are more people which are living in the area, but because if you are a grandson of a Palestinian and you are now giving lectures in Boston, in one of the universities, and your grandfather immigrated from Jaffa during the 48 war, our independence war, immigrated to Lebanon and then left to America, and you are his grandchildren and you are teaching now in Harvard, you probably will be registered in UNRWA papers as a refugee. That should be stopped. And at the same time that around 600,000 Palestinians expelled, left, moved, whatever, from what is today the state of Israel, from Palestine, in their language. More Jews had been expelled from Arab countries, from Libya, Tunisia, the Maghreb, Egypt, Iraq, whatever, Yemen, Syria, and no one is a refugee, not even one. So something not logic and unbalanced happen here, and UNRWA is part of the problem, not of the solution. And now it is clear that members, staff of UNRWA is cooperating with Hamas, commanders in Hamas, terrorists of Hamas, and almost all the UNRWA institutions in Gaza were used by Hamas without any protest of the administration of UNRWA. So UNRWA is part of the problem, not part of the solution. And whoever will come to substitute UNRWA, the better.
So given the humanitarian issue, and you mentioned, Egypt wants no part of refugees from Gaza, another Nakba, as you say. Is there anything the Egyptians are doing well to help deal with the humanitarian issue in Gaza to reduce the likelihood that they may actually face the problem they don't want?
Yes, there are two countries which their contribution is above all the others. It's the Emirates and the Egyptians. They are doing, from what I learned from our people, they are doing a good job helping the Palestinians. The Jordanians sent help as well. But the two countries which contributing more than the others are Egypt and the Emirates. But we have to understand the point of view of the Egyptians. They refuse to bring Palestinians in, not connected at all to the humanitarian issue. It's a political strong position based, as I said, on three elements. One, they despise the Palestinians as a whole. They're afraid from Hamas, which is the military arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, the main opposition to the present regime in Cairo. And they don't want to take part in something which might be portrayed by their enemies as helping the Israelis to make the second Nakba, to deportation of the Palestinians. So from their point of view, it should be understood, it is a political principle, and they are very determined not to let it happen.
So if that's their determination, one potential concern is that even as the Israel-Gaza border has been sealed, that there may be still materials, smuggling, weapons, other things that get through the Egypt's border with Gaza. Presumably, part of Israel's operation would attempt to address that. Do you see have the Egyptians been helpful from their side of the border in trying to seal off that last border of Gaza?
Here you raise a very important question. The end of Rafa, the last road going from west to east along the border between Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula, between Gaza and Egypt, the line called in the code maps of the IDF Philadelphia axis. So we are calling it Philadelphia problem. And here you represent a real problem for us, because either we will control it after the war, or we cannot know what's going on there. It's under the ground, and we don't know how many, if there are kind of corridors into Egypt, meaning tunnels underground. The more that we will be involved with permanent forces on Philadelphia, our ability to deny the fact that we are controlling the Gaza Strip and have obligation according to the national law to the population, the more that we will be in Philadelphia, the less we can defend our position that we are not responsible. So here we have to balance between two interests. One is not to be responsible for the needs of the people in Gaza. It's not our responsibility. They're an open border with Egypt, so the world can take care for that. And the need of the IDF to control this line, otherwise many things can be smuggled in, and maybe that was part of the situation in the past. But we are clear about other demands like no man's land along the border, or freedom to IDF to act inside Sinai Peninsula. At the end of the process, we don't have a clear idea how to be sure that from the border with Egypt, nothing is coming in.
So, General, I want to sort of stay a little bit longer on the Rafa issue, and this is a question that's coming from the audience that echoes one question I had for you. Do you know if the Israeli leadership expects to find Hamas's leadership in Rafa, as well as the remaining hostages? How much of this is, predictable or knowable? If you could elaborate on that rather difficult question.
I think that the best that can be said about it cannot be excluded. We don't know. I don't know. Maybe the intelligence knows much better. But logically, we pushed from the north to the south, on the ground and under the ground. And we know that they moved moved based on our steps ahead. And if logically, if you ask where is the only place they can hide today, relatively to feel secure, it's in Rafa. But I don't know where are they, and we are going to take Rafa not because of the leadership, because we want to dismantle the 4 battalions there, which is the only stronghold with real forces, organized forces that can re-attack Israel. So that should be destroyed.
So the last part you mentioned there about Hamas's last real stronghold being in the south in Rafah, could you address? It's a question from our audience, but one that I also had. Are there concerns about Hamas's ability to reconstitute already to some extent in the northern and central parts of Gaza that have started to be cleared in the initial parts of the operation? And then also, if you could comment relatedly on the extent of the tunnel infrastructure the IDF is still having to deal with in Gaza.
As far as we know, the Hamas didn't succeed to reinstitute itself on the area which had been mopped up by the IDF. We are making those areas raids by ground forces and precise strikes by the Air Force. We just 2 days ago we killed the commander of the Shati battalion, which survived the battle there, and Shati is totally clean from Hamas, but the guy was there still, and we succeeded to identify him and to kill him. And a few days earlier, the battalion with other forces went to under the ground, under the headquarters of UNRWA, and found the center of gravity of the whole command and control system of Hamas, and that was confiscated and had been taken to Israel. It will take us, I don't know how many months to read all the information that they have there and to much better understand their situation and where they succeeded to collect information about Israel and to understand the structure under the ground in the whole area. So I don't believe that they succeeded to reinstitute any part of their organization. There are terrorists that from time to time reaching our forces, open fire and maybe succeeded to kill some soldiers, but in the north and most of the center, not all the center, but most of the center, Hamas was dismantled by our efforts. The dismantling process was ended as intensive operation, but still we are continue to clean it. In Khan Yunis, we didn't gain the whole control, and it will take a week or 2, and then we will have to go deeper into the underground systems, which in Khan Yunis are a huge system. And then to decide when we are doing the same in Rafah, we have to finish in Khan Yunis first, then to move the population. Maybe we will take into account the sensitivities of Ramadan, and we will not do it in Ramadan. So it's tactical issues, but strategically, Israel is committed to gain the control on the ground and under the ground in Rafah, as we did in other parts of the Gaza Strip.
Thank you, General. It was very, very illuminating, and we have a couple more follow-on questions on the Gaza front, including from our audience. And I'd like to take this opportunity to remind our audience: if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box, especially if you have questions for the General regarding the Gaza front and those issues before we move on to the northern front with Hezbollah and other issues. So this is a follow-on question. Is there a high confidence that significant numbers of Hamas have not exfiltrated from Gaza? Are there Do you worry about there being rat lines for leaders and others to flee Gaza?
No, we don't. We don't mind if many of them will flee Gaza. That is, it will make our operation easier. I don't know where they will go, but if they are going out of the area and are not coming back, from our point of view, it's a good solution, and it will reduce the ability of the organization to reestablish itself after the intensive stage and make our intensive stage much easier to conduct.
So building off your final words there, obviously there's been a lot of public discussion about, for lack of a better term, pressure from the United States, the Biden administration. For a long time, we heard there was pressure for Israel, the IDF, to finish up the current phase of the war and transition to presumably some lower or more targeted phase of operations. At least that was the way it was portrayed here. And now you obviously have discussions about a potential long-term ceasefire. Could you give our audience a sense of the view from Israel, what you see as the U.S. Attitude toward the current operation? Is it, do you, obviously ceasefire talks just fell apart. Do you see after Rafa, Israel will transition to a lower intensity phase? And do you see what attitude do you see from the Americans in terms of Israel's operation?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the Americans. From our point of view, it is clear that the intensive stage was over in the north and most part of the center. After taking Khan Yunis and cleaning it, within a few weeks, we will move to the less intensive stage in Khan Yunis as well. And in Rafa, we have to go into the intensive stage, which should never begin there. And we have to establish all the facility, all the logistic and the operational needs, including moving the population out of the area. And then we will do the same in Rafa. And then the less extensive stage raids based on accurate intelligence that we are gathering on the ground or learning from the papers which had been taken from the headquarters and in the computers and interrogation of terrorists, of course. All of that will be part of the efforts to have better intelligence in the second phase in which we are cleaning Gaza slowly, based on good intelligence.
I think that's very important for our audience to hear here in America, especially. It's obviously the word ceasefire is on a lot of people's tongues, a lot of people's minds. Do you think a long-term ceasefire is possible, probable? And if you do think that's the case, do you worry that once there is a longer-term ceasefire, that it becomes increasingly difficult for the resumption of Israeli operations?
That brings us to the issue of the hostages.
Mm-hmm.
My personal view is that we should be ready to pay very high price for releasing the hostages, but not any price. There are demands that should not be met by Israel. I mean, if this is what you want, we will not have an agreement. If they demand that we will retreat from Gaza, if they demand that we will stop the war in Gaza imminently, that if they demand political demands out of the scope of Gaza, for example, they said that they don't want us, the Jews, stop visiting the Temple Mountain. That will not be accepted. So there are some red lines that Israel should not cross in the negotiation with Hamas, but at the same time to be ready to pay very high prices. For example, a pause of 2 months. It's a huge amount of time. Will give the the Hamas organization a lot of time to rebuild its capabilities, to send all what is needed in the strongholds and other places in which we will not be active during these 2 months. So it's a very dangerous step because it will enhance the capabilities of Hamas. And when we come back to fight at the end of the pause, we will have to pay prices because it will be much more complicated to fight the war against Hamas. We will lose the momentum, which now is very strong. So yes, we have to be ready to take those risks, but at the same time, there are some demands that should not be accepted.
So I want to pick up on something you said there. If there is a long-term ceasefire, let's call it 2 months, and you talk about Israel losing momentum, I assume you meant on a sort of operational level. Do you worry also that if there is, say, a 2-month ceasefire and that it actually holds, that there will be so much international pressure on Israel not to resume operations after 2 months of relative quiet?
I think that it will not help the international community in this case because the pressure inside Israel is very, very strong to continue the war to the end. I think that it is a huge number of Israelis, of course, within the Jewish community, it is even more so. And there is a clear majority, a very high majority, to continue the war to the end. The end means that we will really succeed to dismantle those 4 battalions in Rafa. There is 1.5 battalions maybe in the center that we will have to go after and destroy. And then to continue the process of cleaning up the Gaza Strip. And after, I don't know, around a year of doing this operations, raids by ground forces, accurate bomb by the Air Force and so on, we will be in a position that Gaza will be as challenged as Area A in the West Bank. This is the level of achievement that we want, that the whole Gaza Strip will be a area in which there is no even one Israeli soldier, but to which Israeli soldiers are coming in and out every week or twice a week if we have an intelligence which justify to send the ground forces or the Air Force to bomb the target. So this is the situation that we have in mind, meaning full ability of Israel to act inside Gaza to thwart any attempt by the Palestinians to build military capability there, and along the Jordan, along the border, we should have no man's land. I don't know if it will be a mile or half a mile, minefields and so on and so forth, that no one can reach the fence from the Palestinian side. That was one of our biggest mistakes before the war. We are teaching in all our schools that fence cannot defend itself, and you have to defend the fence. And to defend the fence means that you are putting barriers that cannot be crossed easily in front of the fence, and we didn't make it before 7th of October, and we should do it after the war, and we are preparing to do it. We are making all the efforts which will be enough to build this system of no man's land.
You used the phrase defending the fence, and I would just note for our audience, there's a Ginsa paper with that exact title on it, published several years ago, that looks at the operational and tactical challenges of not having that no man's land you describe along the security barrier between Israel and Gaza. Final question.
Yeah, I have to emphasize, it will not be under the sovereignty of the state of Israel. It will remain Palestinian sovereignty area, which will be used to build a barrier between the inner part of Gaza and the fence. That's all.
And work on that has already begun in certain places, correct? Clearing that area you described?
No, and who the army will be responsible to keep it clean, and that no one will infiltrate through the area.
So final question related to Gaza, and actually provides a nice opportunity to pivot to our next area. It's from the audience. Is the United States still providing the IDF with all the military needs to continue the fight in Gaza, as well as a potential full-scale war in the north?
As far as I know, there is no change in the policy and the practicality, and Israel is getting a lot of ammunition and help from the United States of America. The arguments remain in the civilian level, not about the helping Israel to conduct the war in Gaza and maybe later on in Lebanon.
So I want to. Gaza is not the only front that's been fairly intense this week. Obviously, there was a serious exchange of fire in the north as well. General, could you tell us a little bit about what happened in the past few days in the north? Obviously, there's been an ongoing exchange of fire ever since October 8th.
Yeah.
But do you view what's happened in the past few days, including a Hezbollah strike that killed and wounded IDF soldiers and Israeli civilians? Are you worried this is this more of just the same, or are you worried this could potentially present an escalation, and if so, why?
The context is very clear. Both sides decided that they don't want a war, at least now. And kind of game was established between the two sides. There are limits to an area in which both sides can exchange a fire. In the middle, there is defense. And from time to time, when one of the two sides feels that the other side cross red lines, is operating outside the frame of which was designed by action through the weeks. And it is well understood that on the other side, that to cross red lines means that the other side will have the ability to retaliate. Because both sides don't want a war, I don't think that we are in a situation of slippery slope yet. It might come, but the two sides are very determined not to ignite a full war. How long it can survive? Israel has some limitations here. From both sides of the border, the population was evacuated. I don't know the number of in the north, but in our side of the border, it is the whole area of the settlements from Kiryat Shmona to the north, and this is huge number. And the pressure is very clear. Either the government of Israel, solve the issue of Hezbollah, which is very close to those settlements, in some areas closer than Hamas to the targets in the 7th of October. So do something to reduce the threat. And that, I believe, will be the most important challenge for the government and the decision makers. If in the first week of the war, it was clear that we are focusing on Hamas, and whatever Hezbollah tried to do is kind of a potential moving Israel focus from Gaza to the north and disturb Israel from concentrating on the main problem in the south. But the more the time is over, the more is the need to bring back all the civilians in the Israeli side. And for that, you have to do something. I see three options. One, it's politically. The Americans and the Fed succeeded to convince Hezbollah directly, not directly, to retreat, and the Erdogan forces will move to the north. So the whole structure and the capabilities of Hezbollah will not be changed. But the buffer between the actual riders and the settlements will be in an area of, I don't know, 10 kilometers, supervised by the United Nations with new means, maybe forces of the Lebanese army. So at the end, that will take the ability to act against Israel. It will bring us to a better situation in which we can cope with the threat. This is one option. The second one is if the French and the Americans will come and say, guys, we cannot reach any agreement with Lebanon. Then we will have two options. One is to go to a war. Is it the best time? Is it the best situation? I'm not sure, but if you don't have any other choice, maybe this is the only chance that you can take. It's not a question of alternatives if it's the only one. And the other solution might be, okay, we don't want to go to war now. They don't want to go to war now. They don't want to move on the border, or say, okay, what we will do is to enhance the defensive capabilities in the north. In every place that was a battalion will be a brigade, and so on and so forth, to arm the citizens in the north, and they will have the ability to defend themselves, and so on and so forth, but much stronger defensive system, which the calculation will be, now it's too intensive for the economy, for the munition depots of us, for the legitimacy, for the need of the recruited civilians to go back to work, and so on and so forth. I don't know what will be the decision. No question, it is the most important decision since the first week, in which the Prime Minister decided we are not going to open a second front. So this is about the second front, and this is a very problematic decision. Whatever will be the decision, it will be attacked from the other side.
To jump back just a little bit, one thing we've been reading about is maybe it's novel, maybe it's new, Hezbollah's use of anti-tank guided munitions for targeting buildings in Israel's north. Is this a tactical surprise to you? Is this a threat that maybe Israelis weren't expecting? And are there countermeasures, defenses beyond targeting the launch sites?
No, the truth is that it's not new. So at the beginning, Hezbollah tried to bring into the border teams of Palestinians, which we do infiltrate into Israel. Kind of an infiltration operation, which all the cover around, all the frame was done by Hezbollah, but the team itself is a Palestinian team. I think that there were 7 attempts to do it. We killed all the Palestinians. They never succeeded to cross behind the line of the border, behind the fence. And Hezbollah moved to other option, and they use rockets, missiles, and many anti-tank missiles. Why? Because it is so low that the Iron Dome cannot intercept it. And the range is a good range. The new Cornet have, if I'm not mistaken, range of 10 kilometers, so they can use it. And most of their targets are empty real estate. Buildings in the north without the population which had been evacuated. And the same about what can be seen from the Israeli strong points. We are concentrating on their military capability. And we succeeded to kill more than 200 members of Hezbollah, most of them operational guys from the operation system of Hezbollah, many of them connected to the anti-tank unit in Hezbollah, and the success of the raids is very high. We are succeeding to erode their capabilities in the north. Is it a solution? The answer is no. It is not. Is it dangerous? Less than a full war. So this is the way that we decided to manage and to defend against Hezbollah, which, by the way, it's the hypocrisy of the world is very clear. We had a war with Hamas. Why? Who gives Hezbollah the legitimacy to interfere in this bloody war? What happened? Israel is a sovereign state, and they attack a sovereign state, and the world say nothing. So we will have to solve this problem by ourselves. Will it be now, or we will have to wait a little bit till we will gain back all the munition and all the spare parts which are needed for a long war? It's a good question. I don't have an answer to. I'm sure that people in Tel Aviv are considering both options.
Thank you, General. That was very illuminating. So I want to try to wrap together a couple of questions from our audience here that sort of keep looking at the larger threat. Obviously, here in America, we're paying attention to what our own Air Force and Navy are busy doing with Iranian proxies in Yemen and Syria and Iraq. And we saw recently that several things exploded in Syria and unattributed airstrikes, attacks. To address a couple of things from our audience, when will Israel deal with sort of the other Iranian satellites or proxies, beyond Lebanon and Gaza, which are obviously very intense and consuming? What is Israel's perspective on the rest of this larger Iranian threat, which is clearly active around the region?
Israel is a state with 10 million citizens. It's less than the number of which enter to Manhattan in the morning and go out of Manhattan at night. So I think what we are doing against Hamas in Gaza and the question of a full war with Hezbollah, and at the same time we succeeded to arrest in the West Bank more than 3,000 terrorists, more than half of them from Hamas, others from other organizations like Islamic Jihad. We killed more than 300 Palestinians, 90% of them with a weapon in their hands when they had been killed. So for Israel, it's a lot on the table, and for the moment it's enough. If we don't have any real need, we are not going to expand our wars. We are cooperating with the Americans and the Saudis to deal with the long-range missiles, cruise missiles, and drones which launched by the Houthis against Israel, and the cooperation, because all these three countries cooperating, defending themselves. Part of that is going over Saudi Arabia, so the Saudis are contributing to the data. Part of it is over the American Navy in the Red Sea, and they have to defend themselves. So it's kind of a new grid, informal grid in the Middle East under the umbrella of the Americans, which share information and just to defend itself.
And on your last point there, I would note for our audience that JINSA put out a paper last year on the integrated air and missile defense need and progress in the Middle East. I would reference that to everyone who's interested on our call today. And in general, as you said in your last response, I think we've asked enough of you already tonight. So thank you.
I don't hear you.
I think we've asked enough of you already tonight. So
Jonathan, I don't hear you.
Oh,
Jonathan.
Well, maybe that's the sign that we need it anyway. Can you hear me now, General? Well, to our audience, if we've lost General Amadror, I was just at the point to tell him anyway, I'm going to cede the remaining time back to him. I think we've had a wide-ranging discussion today. Thank you all for joining, and keep your eyes peeled for another JINSA webinar and regular war update from Israel.
You had been disconnected at the beginning of the question.
Can you hear me now?
Ask the same question again, because you had been disconnected when you begin the question.
I was just actually saying, I think we've asked enough of you already, so I'm going to cede the remaining 10 minutes back to you and sort of sign off for this evening, and look forward to seeing you again on another JINSA webinar soon.